Lunch is over with. We're halfway through the day. And now it is time to introduce our next speaker. He's come a long way. We're happy to hear him. And I just want to take the time to introduce our keynote speaker, Justin Volpe.
Yeah. Hey, how you guys doing? My name's Justin, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to MHA, Karen, Alexia Wolf that invited me here. I traveled from Miami this morning and I'm flying out this afternoon, and it's been a beautiful conference so far. I'm going to share my recovery story with you guys today about how I came here. I'm a certified recovery peer specialist. I live in Miami, Florida, and I want you to take home, 3 different perspectives today on the people you serve and your own stories on trauma, substance use, and mental health. Does that sound good? Yes. Are you guys sleeping after lunch? Where's the coffee? Go get your coffee, all right? Come on, get it brewing. So my current role is I'm a peer support coordinator at an organization in Arlington, Virginia called the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors, long acronym. I've been at that role since January of last year, and I work with different states in supporting their initiatives to start programs in the community for mental health. I met Alexia Wolf through an agency that we work with called the Department of Recovery Support Services, the DRSS, and we meet with all the heads of the Office of Recovery across the country once a month. So if you do have needs for your state, feel free to reach out to her to connect with what's going on locally. But I'm new to this job, and it's not direct service, and I do love doing the work I do, but I spent most of my career as a peer specialist working in a program called the Miami-Dade County Jail Diversion Program. And in that program, we got people out of jail that had serious mental health and co-occurring issues and got them linked to treatment in the community. My job as a peer support specialist was to walk the walk with people in the community and make sure that they didn't end up in jail. I would get them out, have their clothes from jail, make sure they had their medication, food, got them to the shelter, to the halfway houses, took them to meetings, whatever to support their recovery in the community. In 14 years, I helped thousands of people get out of jail. And there was good days and bad days. And if you guys have done this work long enough, you know there's no miracle program and that, recovery is individualized. But it taught me a lot. And I used that experience. I worked on the streets for so long and in my national role to make sure people have those implementations in their communities and that people with lived experience are part of the conversation and at the table and getting paid. I'm a rap trainer. You guys know what rap is, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I used to do CPI at my old job. CPI is Crisis Prevention Institute. In 14 years working in the community with people with criminal charges and serious mental health, not once have I had any physical encounters, all because of the way you treat people with respect and approach them. In my experience, the peer specialists had better results dealing with people than clinicians, law enforcement, and other people doing the outreach because of the way we approach people. I've served as an international consultant. I work with islands out in the Pacific jurisdiction and helping them with peer support. But I started all my speaking 15 years ago with CIT training. Do you guys know what CIT is? Crisis Intervention Team Training. And it's a training for police officers to teach them de-escalation and that they won't arrest, that if necessary, they'll take them to a psychiatric facility to be evaluated. We have over 7,500 officers trained in Miami, and I've trained over 3,000 of them. As a result of this training, the past 20 years, we've seen arrests go down, abuse on people with mental illness go down, and the attitude of law enforcement change, and not just to want to arrest somebody, to want to help somebody. And that doesn't speak for every officer, but I have seen a lot change in the community. In CIT, I won an award 2 years ago, the Fred Fries Award. He was a psychiatrist that had schizophrenia. And I've been in 2 films that I'll try, if we have time, I'll try to share one of the trailers. 2020, there was a PBS film called The Definition of Insanity. It was based on the work at the jail diversion program. It followed us in the community and what it was like for somebody to go through the court process. And last year, I was in the Ken Burns film, Hiding in Plain Sight, on youth mental illness. So with that, I'm going to tell you my story. I'm not from Miami. I'm from South Jersey. Yep, I know. So sorry to kill that for you. But like, oh man, you came all the way from Miami. I didn't come that far. But yeah, the Eagles that was a really tough loss this year. So my grandfather, who was the gentleman at the tie, was the son of Italian immigrants, and my grandmother was an immigrant from Cyprus. And they had my dad and my uncle. My uncle had schizophrenia. And when my grandmother got here, she thought the streets were literally paved with gold, but they lived very poor. My grandfather struggled with work. They did construction business in South Jersey, but they lived very poor. And my father and my uncle had nothing more than a 3rd or 4th grade education, grew up in poverty and a very dysfunctional home. My grandmother grew into a Great Depression. She was hospitalized at Ancora for months at a time. You guys ever heard of Ancora? Yeah. It's a state mental health institution in Jersey that was built in the late 1800s. My father said that when she'd come home from the institution, she would shake so much from the electroshock therapy, she couldn't hold a glass of water and it would be spilling out the cup. My grandfather got deep into the Jehovah's Witnesses and started to get a lot of religious ideations. He thought that God started talking to him and that he believed he was a prophet from God. He started to tell people in the Jehovah's Witnesses that he was a prophet from God, and he started a religious cult in the 50s and 60s in South Jersey called the Restored Kingdom of Israel. And he thought that the apocalypse was going to happen, and he said the world was going to end in 1979, and the people that were involved in this cult were going to be saved from the apocalypse. Didn't happen in 1979, he pushed it to 1985. He was one of these guys, maybe next year, you know? But he was well-spoken, he wasn't an alcoholic, he wasn't an addict, he dressed well, and people listened to him, even though he obviously had problems. So my brother and I grew up in this cult. My brother's 10 years older than me, we have different moms, and it was a very secretive, controlling organization. You know, I grew up in a home with 2 parents that worked with food on the table, but there was so much tension in the house because of these issues of the world and the apocalypse and the government and this and everything was, you know, bad. There was a lot of issues and tension, and you could cut the tension with a knife. I always played the peacemaker in a domestic situation, always in my house, and that helped me have the role I have today. So, you know, I'm like 4 or 5 years old, I'm trying to ride a bike, and they're like, you know, the world's gonna end. I'm like, damn, you know, can I get some training wheels? I'm like, you know, like, man, that's pretty heavy, you know, like, so I was always like super anxious, you know, on the edge, looking over my shoulder, like, you know, God's watching. I'm like, damn, like, where is he here? You know, like, right? So it was like this paranoid and this trauma that I experienced stayed with me, and what's taught to you at a young age sticks with you, right? So my parents were separated, they're fighting all the time, and we left the cult, and they put me in public school. And I was about 9 or 10 years old, and they're like, go make friends. I'm like, well, is the world gonna end or not? They're like, hey, don't mention that, right? Like a good American family, they brushed it under the rug, and I was off to school, you know, drinking whole milk, you know? And the chocolate milk was better though. They didn't do 2% back then, they had the full fat. At least in Florida, my kid gets 2% now. I don't know. So, you know, I did decent in school. I played sports. You know, I wasn't like outstanding at everything, but I fit in. You know, I did what I had to do. And, you know, my freshman year of high school, I was 12th in my class academically, and I was like, you know, feeling confident. And it wasn't until that freshman year that one of my friends that I met outside of the group, one of my first friends, he died in a dirt bike accident. And if you guys are here, you know South Jersey, people ride dirt bikes, ride four-wheelers, stuff like that. He had jumped a jump with a dirt bike, and when he landed, his neck hit the handlebars, and it actually crushed his trachea, and he suffocated out to death in the woods in Jersey. And this is 1999, so there's no cell phones, you know, nobody's getting out there anytime soon. So we took the loss hard, you know, he was only 14 years old. It was like I lost like a brother, you know, so I started not to care about school so much, started to drink, started to smoke pot, started to, you know, skip class, get detention, and just say, you know, F it, you know, this isn't my main priority. My priority was finding a mechanism to cope with the feelings that I had, because I didn't know how to express myself. Around that time, that my best friend died, my grandfather died, and we were estranged and not, you know, talking. But this was the front page of the Atlantic City Press. It said, "An immortal leader has a mortal end." I mean, like, you know, my last name is Volpe. There's not like 1,000 of us, so it's like, you know, I don't want to be tied to this. I'm trying to get a girlfriend. I'm a sophomore in high school. You know, no, that's not my family. You know, so you know, it was a weird time. It was an uncomfortable time, and to mask those feelings, just the drugs escalated. This is late 90s, early 2000s. We start going into cocaine, ecstasy, LSD, mushrooms, and I'm just off the charts, right? That's my brother and my father. My brother was living in Florida at the time. He was actually a model in the 90s and early 2000s. He got the good looks in the family. I'm up here talking about this stuff, but you know we're a bunch of stupid kids because they put an undercover cop in our high school. He's like 32 years old. We think he's a junior. I forget the guy's name, but I always call him Billy. All I know is Billy didn't like to do drugs, but he liked to buy a lot of drugs, right? And you know, they busted like, you know, a bunch of kids in our class. I got called down to the office. They didn't find anything on me, and I skated out of that situation. And I was like, you know, I was lucky, and I said I got to stay clean now. And staying clean to me was just drinking on the weekends, right? So I played sports. You know, I played basketball. I ran track and field. I still play basketball today. I am going to be 40 this year, and my ankle is twisted from this weekend, but don't ask me about that. I used to be okay. But, you know, I graduated high school. I moved out when I turned 18, worked a bunch of odd jobs, construction, retail, restaurants, got a house with a bunch of my buddies, rented this house in Jersey, in South Jersey where we lived. It was cheap. We rented a whole house for $500 at the time. So we're just drinking and using, partying our butts off, you know. And it wasn't until my 19th birthday that we had this big party, and my brother came up from Florida, and he saw us, you know, getting high and drinking all night. He woke up the next morning to use the bathroom, and we were still up all night. And he said, "Man, I don't like these people in Jersey. This is why I left Jersey." He's like, you're going to get stuck in this rut. He goes, "Man, why don't you come with me to Miami and get clean?" Man, you don't get clean in Miami. You already know that. I mean, I don't know if you need a PhD to figure that out. So, you know, I moved to Miami in 2003. I was 19 years old. Since my brother was a model, he was on South Beach. And, you know, things just escalated really quick. From 2003 to 2007, I must have moved about 10 different times. I must have had about 24 different jobs, very unstable, you know, but I was able to make ends meet. I was able to work 2-3 low-level jobs, pay my rent, and get high and drink. Those days are over. This is my Jersey Shore pic, if you don't believe me. I was there. You know, work was unstable. I got a job at a place called Volpe Liquors, not a common name. Some 85-year-old Italian guy had a liquor store on South Beach. So I said, "Hey, paisano, you got to give me a job. Look at my ID." He's like, "You're hired." He fired me 3 weeks later. I guess we weren't family, you know. I got fired because of an undercover cop in this scenario, because I guess you can't buy stolen razor blades from people off the street at a liquor store, but that's up to the legislation to decide. So, at 21 years old, addicted to drugs and alcohol, I became a security guard because I had every qualification, I worked midnight at an apartment complex that I lived in, 11 to 7, and there was a lot of unstable things happening in the middle of the night on Miami Beach. And, a lot of domestic violence situations, people getting robbed in the garage, people intoxicated all the time, people getting locked out of their apartments. Hey, man, my girl won't let me in the apartment. Can you go talk to her? I'm like, man, I just work the front desk. I'm so sorry, but you need to figure that out. This one time, this guy came down, and he came from the club about 4 or 5 in the morning. He had all this jewelry on, and he starts taking all this jewelry off and just throwing it on the front desk. And he's saying, my wife caught me cheating on me. I'm going to go kill myself. And I was like, oh, man, right? And he's taking all the watch, the chain, the rings, and then he just leaves. Well, I knew he lived on the 11th floor, right? So I'm like, all right, maybe this guy's not BSing. So I took all his jewelry, and I pawned it. No, I'm kidding. So I took all his jewelry, and I sat outside his door on the 11th floor till my shift got over and knocked on his door like, hey, man, you all right? Hey, leave me alone. I'm going to sleep. I said, hey, man, take your stuff. I'm going home. So it was a lot of unstable times. And, it was 3, 4 in the morning. I was just trying to take a nap, Anybody that works security will get that joke. Okay. So one time this woman came down and she was completely intoxicated, cursed us all out, sent us to hell. The boyfriend came down, looked and said, you got to go check on her. She's talking about the mafia. She's paranoid. I said, look, man, I'm so sorry, but I'm not going to get involved, right? Well, that next morning somebody called out, so I was working the second end of a double. It was around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and we got a call from the gym, and that same woman actually jumped, and she jumped from the 9th floor and went head over heels. And I got out there, I called the paramedics, we called 911, the police came, and there was nothing they could do, and she passed. And I was like, I felt terrible. I felt terrible that maybe I should have intervened, maybe I should have done something. And, I had to write an incident report, and the job wasn't happy with the incident report, and I'm like, a resident just died. You should talk to staff about this. You should talk to the residents, about what's going on. I was like, man, I can't do this. I'm leaving this job. So I went to Wet Willie's. I don't know if you guys know Wet Willie's. You might have heard about it in a few songs. But basically, for those that don't know, they sell grain alcohol mixed with rum and a lot of sugar, and they're bright colored frozen drinks. So basically you drink 1 or 2 and you're pretty much blasted, and at the time they were really cheap. So it was the cheap plates to get a drink and get drunk. I worked there, and it was busy. It was a busy place. I worked there less than a year, and I made over $40,000 there. So I know, and I'm 21 years old. So you think I put that on my 401k? I sure wish I did. I walked home with just pockets full of cash all the time, going out to eat, going to the club. Now I got money to buy drugs that I couldn't afford before, doing cocaine, taking pills, and just completely unmanageable. Things started to slip away from me, and I got fired for drinking on the job. It was just one of those things where I blamed other people. I didn't take accountability. I didn't get fired at Macy's for drinking on the job. I mean, it was a bar. You know what I mean? It wasn't out of the blue, but I left that job and I didn't leave my apartment for 2 weeks, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I had dropped out of the local community college previously. I had anxiety. I didn't know if I was going to get another beat job for $6 or $7 an hour. And my friends would come by and say, hey man, you got to get up. You got to get a job. You got to do something. And I was like, all right. So my brother, he helped find me a job at a place called 510 Ocean. This restaurant doesn't exist anymore, but Little John was a part owner. we used to throw some really big parties on the weekends, and I worked in the kitchen, and I made all the food. And we'd throw parties for Little John and his whole crew, and Puff Daddy, and you know, Friday, Saturday was busy, like so busy you couldn't even walk in there. But Monday through Thursday, off season on the beach was dead. And we just hung out, drank, and got high all the time. And I remember this point in my life, I was good. Like, I made $1,100 a month. I was able to pay my bills, have a couple hundred to get high and get drunk with. And I was like, it's okay, right? But man, at least addiction for me doesn't work like that. It can never stay, you know, maintained. And it wasn't until one day the executive chef walked in. He was this big guy from Texas, about 6'5", had a thick Texas accent. They called him Big Tex. And what I didn't know is he lost custody of his child that day and that he was in recovery. And he asked me if I wanted to get high. So I said, sure. So he goes into that office. You see that door in the back there? Go into that office. It's messy office, paperwork all over the place. And he pulls out a glass pipe, like a real big glass pipe. And he sticks a rock in there. And he starts lighting it up with a blowtorch that we use for the creme brulee. Y'all know what creme brulee is, right? The caramelized sugar. Well, man, I was drinking so much I didn't even ask him what it was. And I hit this thick white smoke twice, and I didn't even know what it was, but as soon as it hit my brain, I wanted more, and I could never obtain that high again, and that was crystal meth. And because at the time on the beach, meth was more of a gay drug. I couldn't find any. And now I'm buying drugs that I'm not even in control of my actions right now. I'm buying cocaine, I'm buying pills, I can buy whatever I get my hands on. I get real skinny. You know, I'm 6'1", I weigh 185 pounds. I weighed about 130 pounds. I started to get real paranoid. I stopped showering, right? I think people are following me. I think police are trying to set me up when I go buy things. I couldn't walk on the main strips where all the tourists were laughing and smiling and drinking and having a good time. I started walking in the alleys because I couldn't look these people in the eye, right? I thought people were trying to kill me, you know? I had this bad obsession with law enforcement, and I just got really sick. I got really sick, and that was the summer of 2006, and I walked around like that for months. And, you know, I pulled out cash advances on credit cards to get drugged. I destroyed my credit, stealing supplies from the restaurant, stealing food so I didn't have to buy food. Just real bad shape. I was walking in Walgreens like this, like up for a couple days. I had a couple dollars in my pocket, and I was standing in line to buy cigarettes, and somebody was in front of me, and I don't know what it was, something drew me to this man, and I tapped him on the shoulder like that, and he turned around, and as skinny as I was, I lifted him up by his shirt collar, and I picked him up off the ground, and I said, "You're an Israeli prophet. You could save my father's life." Now, that might sound like gibberish to you, right? When people are in crisis, when they say things. But what was that? That was the trauma that I experienced as a kid that was coming out in ways that the drugs and alcohol couldn't mask anymore. My intention wasn't to hurt him. My intention wasn't to rob him. And he just turned around and said, "Man, I'm just trying to buy milk and eggs to feed my family." I felt so bad. I had a complete psychotic breakdown for hours outside of Walgreens, just pacing back and forth, hearing voices, seeing things that weren't there, talking to people that weren't there. Just a complete psychotic break. And, you know, cops going by me real slow, people going in and out of Walgreens, getting ready for work. It's just another day in Miami Beach. You know, I think that the trash trucks in my alley were digging through my trash. I thought that was the CIA, the FBI, they were trying to set me up. I thought that the ships by the port of Miami would give me signals that the apocalypse was happening. Now I started to believe the stuff that was taught to me as a kid. And, you know, I called my brother. He was in LA on a modeling job. At 3 in the morning, it was midnight there. I said, "Man, Danny, there's people trying to kill me. They're going to get me." He goes, "Hey, man, stay right there. Just stay where you're at." He jumped on a red-eye flight from LA to Miami and was in Miami by 10 o'clock the next morning. And the airline forgot to charge his credit card. So it was one of these God intervened moments that got him there. And he goes, "Hey, get in the truck. I'm going to take you somewhere." I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "Don't worry about it." I said, "Well, if we're driving, can we get a beer?" So we stopped at a bodega. I got a warm 32-ounce beer, and I'm drinking that thing like, you know, 10 o'clock in the morning. we get to this rehab in Boca Raton, and these guys were like intervention specialists. They like, whatever they said to me, I don't remember, but they sold me, right? And then about 10 minutes later, there was the fine details of, by the way, this rehab costs $10,000 a month. And I was like, nah, man, I make $8 an hour. I don't think this is gonna add up. He's like, no, we'll figure it out. I said, no, I'm not taking this kind of your responsibility. I don't want you to. We don't have money like that, you know? And I left. He was pissed. My parents were divorced. He called them. They had an intervention. That's during that time my brother came down. They had an intervention with my parents, him, and another buddy from the beach that was in recovery. And they said, you need to go someplace. I was like, I have an apartment. I have a job. And I'm clean. They said, the only reason you're clean is because you don't have any money right now. And you need to go to outpatient. So I swindled my way of going inpatient, and I stayed outpatient. I get to outpatient, and you know, people are on their hands and knees, praying to God, talking about the 12 steps and the higher power. And I was like, hey man, I don't want another religious program right now. But I stopped doing drugs, right? But I was doing everything I said, but I wasn't putting my full effort in, right? Because I had reservations about using again. And, you know, at least for me, a good sign that I had a mental health problem was that those drugs and alcohol were not present and those symptoms came back. And I bought a one-way ticket to fly to Jersey, and I had some paranoid delusion that Al-Qaeda or the Mafia was out to kill my family, and I got hospitalized in Pomona, New Jersey for 3 weeks. I thought I went there voluntarily, but they sure as hell wouldn't let me go home. I don't know how that worked out to this day. But, you know, I get there, I tell them the story, and they're like, you have an incurable disease, you have to take medication the rest of your life, and you can never smoke marijuana again. What kind of bad news is that, man? Bad news to hear. Go all the way to Jersey to hear this? So they start giving me medication. They come and see me the next day. They're like, how you feeling? I felt the same way. I had the same whatever story I was spinning. So weeks are going by, and people that came in after me are being discharged before me. So I'm like, what's going on here, you know? So I eavesdropped them talking at the nurse's station, like, he's not getting any better. We're gonna have to send him to Ancora. I was like, oh hell no, right? I was like, Ancora is where my grandmother got electroshock therapy. Ancora is where my uncle with schizophrenia would be locked up for the criminally insane when he committed a crime. Ancora is where you heard about on Halloween where people chop you up in Jason masks. I'm like, no, I'm not going to Ancora. I might be crazy, but I'm not stupid, right? So the next day they're like, hey, how you feeling? I'm like, man, I feel great. I'll take these meds every day. I will go to meetings. I will say whatever I have to say to get out of here. And I got discharged. I showed up at Little John's restaurant even though I wasn't there for a month. I walked in the back door, I showed you, I started washing dishes. They're like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm washing dishes. What do you think of? They're like, dude, you're fired. I'm like, I didn't know that, you know? You gotta be proactive in this economy to get a job, you know? Show up, start working, maybe you get paid, you know? You don't know. So I got my job back. God knows you wanted to eat at this restaurant if they kept hiring me, I'll be honest with you. I got my job back, I was taking the medication, I was feeling okay, and I was like, you know what, this is good. I'm gonna save this medicine for later, and in the meantime, I think I'm gonna get higher on my birthday. Started smoking again, stopped taking the meds, started getting the heavier drugs, got worse, and you know, I tried to take the meds again, but it was too late. It didn't work, you know. This was one of the only places I would go for my therapy was Flamingo Park to play basketball. And it didn't last too long. It ended real quick. April 2007, 16 years ago, during this time, I was incarcerated in Miami-Dade County Jail on a felony. I got arrested, and as soon as I get arrested, I tell them, you know, I take medication. Now I take medication, right? Yeah, you know, I got a problem, right? I take meds. I need to go to the hospital, I tell them. They were like, well, we'll put you up on the 9th floor. Well, the 9th floor was the psych floor. It's now a closed wing of the Miami-Dade County Jail where a lot of abuse happened. There was actually exposés on CBS, on the local CBS News, because people died up there. I get up there, This is my LinkedIn profile pic if y'all want to look me up, okay? I get up there. I was cutting my hair. I was like a little on the left, a little on the right, you know? I don't think I cut any food with those scissors, though. I'm not. You're like, ew. So I get up there, man, and you know the lights are on 24/7. People are being beat around the clock. I'm signing consents. I don't know what I'm signing. They're handing me fistfuls of pills. I know that I got a cellmate, and I figure I asked him what he did. Like, what are you in for? Because after the show, they say in the crime shows in Jersey, like, hey, what are you in for? Right? Oh, he's like, he picks out a file he has, and in this file is a picture of a butt end of a pair of scissors sticking out of this woman's chest. He goes, you know, I stabbed my wife, but she still loves me. I'm like, holy shit, right? I'm not sleeping now. Like, yo, who did you lock me up with, you know? So, you know, they let you shower once a week. So there was a sign by the shower. It said, you know, if you've been raped, please call this number. So I'm like, I'm not showering. You know, I know enough about jail. I'm not dropping the soap, right? So I'm going dirty up in this thing, you know? They're not going to want me. So I'm not showering, right? I'm not eating. I'm not sleeping. Now I pose a threat to myself. So now they come around on suicide watch, and they start coming around every 15 minutes. And they tap on the glass, and they say, show your face. 15 more minutes. So, you know, that's 4 times an hour, every hour, 96 times a day. So after a couple hours, you know, you're putting up a foot. You know what I'm saying? You're putting up a hand. And they're like, show your face. I'm like, you think I slept out the food hole? Like, where did I go? You know? So, you know, this went on for days. And now if I wanted to sleep, I couldn't sleep. And the guy adjacent to me in the cell told the correction officer to screw off. And they used to put the worst correction officers on that floor that were problematic to deal with the crazy people as punishment, not a well-trained officer. So he pulls this guy out of the cell and just starts beating the living, you know, stuff out of him at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And to this day, I hear this poor man screaming as his flesh is hitting the concrete. And he's saying, please, God, no. Please, God, I'm sorry. Please stop. Until I just heard a thud. And then they drug him off. So I'm like, yo, man, where the hell am I? Like, you know, so I was in there for 6 weeks. And what I didn't know was that my family was in contact with the program I told you I worked for so many years. I had a diagnosed mental illness. I had an eligible charge, and I was taking medication. Whether the medication was working or not, I didn't know. But they transferred me to a hospital after 6 weeks, and so a social worker came in and said, you know, you have an open case. If you work with us, you know, you can go to treatment in the community and stay in a recovery house. And of course, I'm like, where do I sign up? You know, a lot of people I dealt with, myself included, would sign up, even though it was a voluntary program, just to get out of jail and not know the work you had to do to put in once you got out. So I get out of jail. They put me in an area called Miami Gardens. I go to outpatient treatment at a local hospital, co-occurring disorders. I'm going to outpatient treatment, riding a van, about 15 miles to this program. The van picks you up, drops you off, and I'm taking the medicine. But wait a second, I got one more paycheck for me at the restaurant. They owe me money. I know everybody that owes me money. A couple people in here look familiar. No, I'm kidding. No, so I get this check for like $1,000 and I take off. I'm on probation, I'm on this court-mandated treatment, and I take off and I leave Miami Gardens and I go to an area called Liberty City. Liberty City is a rough area. You may see some episodes of the first 48 where Liberty City is. And I meet a woman, who's a mother of 6 kids in a Section 8 house. The same woman spent time at Chattahoochee State Hospital for second-degree murder. And we just run through this check. We smoke these things called dirties, weed and coke. And she left after a few days, ran out of money. I was in that same condition, skinny, dirty clothes, unmedicated, no food. And one of her boyfriends came in looking for her and said, you gotta get out of here. So I start walking from Liberty City to Miami Gardens. I walk up what's 54th Street and I make a right on 27th Avenue. on 27th Avenue off Martin Luther King, there's a Metro Rail station where people are getting ready for work in the morning. They're taking the train. It's late July, early August 2007 in Miami. It's hot. It is so thick, it gets hot at 7, 8 in the morning. I'm sweating. People are getting ready for work. They're holding their nose. They're going like this. They're calling me names. I'm thinking to myself, oh, man. I start going by where the county police station is. The cops are going by me real slow. And I just cover my face, like, and that's the only time I prayed. I'm like, please, God, please keep driving. Just keep going. And I don't know how, but somewhere along that walk, I told myself I felt physically and emotionally sick. I said I used to get high and drink. There used to be girls. There used to be parties. We used to have fun. I said, I'm not having fun. I walked 12 miles home, and I crashed on the bed, and the phone was ringing. Like there's like a plug-in phone, like a regular phone, you know, not a cell phone. And it was ringing for days. And I was like, hello? They're like, hey, where you been? And I'm like, oh, I'm sick. They're like, yeah, that's not gonna fly. You need to go back to program. And I was like, all right. And I went back to treatment. I stopped doing drugs, but I continued to drink. Don't clap yet. Okay, I didn't get clean in my lens yet. But because I stayed clean off drugs and took the medication, I felt better. I passed my drug test, and I closed out my court case. I'm leaving the courthouse, and there's these escalators. You go down the courthouse. So I'm like running down these escalators, right? Like, you know, to go faster, to leave. And they're like, before you go, come talk to us in the office. And I'm like, about what? I'm done, right? They're like, just sit down. They were like, how would you like to work with severely mentally ill people? I'm like, no, right? I was, no, right? They're like, no, you could be a county employee. I said, lady, I'm paranoid. I'm delusional. She goes, you'll fit right in. So I went from having an open felony to becoming a county employee 8 months later. And I was given the job as a peer specialist. I didn't know what a peer specialist was. I didn't know what they did. I didn't sign up to be one. But I knew I needed a job, and it was a county job. And now I was on the other side of that picture that I just showed you. And I was working with people, getting them out of jail, walking all around Miami-Dade County, taking the bus, getting them to appointments, and doing a lot of street outreach. And it gave me a role. It gave me an opportunity for service. And even though I still had my own struggles, it gave me something to do. It gave me purpose, right? And things started to get better slowly, right? As we know, recovery isn't just get clean and take medicine and, bam, you're going to be a millionaire. Like, it doesn't happen like that, right? So it's been a long road. I met what would be my wife 6 months later in 2008. She's from Guyana. I don't know if there's any West Indian people in the house. I eat some good food on the weekends. Food I did not grow up with in South Jersey. That's Judge Steve Leifman. He's the founder of the jail diversion program in Miami, Florida. He performed the ceremony for my wife and I. We've been married this year for 14 years. Yep. I started, like I said, continual process. I'm still going to therapy. I'm still going to my appointments. I'm still struggling with alcohol at this time. I'm a peer specialist. I'm still struggling with alcohol because in my mind, I'm not an alcoholic. People told me I had a mental health problem and I was a drug addict. Well, I was 23 years old when I got arrested. You're not going to say I'm an alcoholic. That's for somebody that drinks whiskey in the morning, right? That's not me. So I went to a place to get treatment for my trauma called the Trauma Resolution Center. And I started to do specialized therapy that was on a grant. And I started to get help. And I started to realize some of the things I was going through and why I did some of the things I did. And, I learned about forgiveness. This is a prayer that's helped me over the years. It's a Hawaiian forgiveness prayer. And, I got back from therapy one day, and me and my wife had this little one-bedroom apartment. And I go in the bedroom, and I get on my hands and knees, and I start to pray and, ask for forgiveness for the things I did and the life I led. And in the middle of that prayer, I was interrupted, and my wife walked in and said, I think I'm pregnant. And as one door of my life was closing, another door opened. And I had my first son 12 years ago. And, just being a father and knowing I was going to be a father helped change my life. and helped make me, reevaluate my purpose and how I was gonna be, And this kid is awesome, man. I'll tell you what, my firstborn definitely helped save my life. And, after he was born, I quit drinking. I went back to AA. This is what worked for me. I'm not pushing AA on people, but this is what worked for me. And, I celebrated 10 years last year. I started to feel better. The medicine started to work better. When I was drinking, before he was born, I got really overweight. I was almost 240 pounds. I put on like 100 pounds from when I was at my lowest. I was, in bad shape, and I had to learn how to live again. I mean, that's just, to this day, I just always got to stay on top of things to keep improving health-wise, because, I don't want to end up in another system, and I want to be there for my family. So I worked on the street for 8 years without a car. My wife and I shared a car, and even if I had a car, we couldn't put people in the car as a county employee, right? So we would call taxis, we would do a lot of work on the bus, we would walk. And when you're working in the street in Miami and it rains, it doesn't rain down. It rains from left to right sometimes. So you'd be walking with an umbrella like that, you come to work, you're soaked. I had to change the clothes all the time. I walk into a meeting, sweat my butt off, and the judges are there with the county commissioners, and this county commissioner looks at me and says, "Why do you look out of breath?" I go, "Because I was on the bus and I tried to get here for this meeting." And she goes, "You don't have a car?" I go, "No, they're too cheap to get a car, right?" They're like, "Nah, shut up, right?" She's like, "You don't have a car?" And she was like, "Oprah, I'm gonna steal your joke, okay?" She's like, "You get a car today, okay?" And I was like, "Okay." And we had a hybrid car designated to the program. And, people find ways. When you advocate, they used to tell me, "You're never getting a car. Stop asking, Stop asking. It's not happening." And, the right opportunity came up. Now we're running an AC, and that AC was on full blast. What? County's paying for this gas, baby. Making up for lost time. They're like, "Justin, it's 40 degrees in here." I don't care. Doing this work, things kept progressing. I had an article in the New York Times, Washington Post in 2015. The New York Times article is an article called "Jails have become warehouses for the poor, ill, and addicted." And it was a report that said things that that the majority of people in jail have a serious mental illness, and that most of them there, 3 out of 4, are for nonviolent property offenses, and that there's a higher percentage of Black and Hispanic people incarcerated. And we need to do better. Jails do not need to be the place where people get help. People should not have to get arrested to get help. We need to help people before they get into the system, and then help them when they re-enter. I know you guys watched C-SPAN that night. I was on it, 3 o'clock in the morning. Man, I show this stuff to some young people, and they're like, "What's C-SPAN?" I was like, "Oh, man." The First Lady invited me to the White House last year. I got an email from Dr. Biden, and they previewed one of the films I was in. I had to make sure it wasn't spam, right? I had to make sure they didn't want my credit card information. So I was honored to be there, and let me just tell you, I ate all your worth of tax dollars worth of shrimp that night, okay? They're like, "Would you like some more chicken?" I said, "No chicken, give me the shrimp, come on, don't be cheap now." So I was also at the Supreme Court one year for an event for Judge Leifman, and I wasn't the only convicted felon in that courtroom. No, I'm just kidding. It's an award I got last year, CIT International. To this day, most of these are supplements. Don't get scared of this picture. I take my medication, I take supplements to support my health. And it's something I do every day and I talk about, and I don't care. Everybody's path is different, but if this helps keep me out of jail, keep me out of the hospital, and keep me there for my family, I'll do it, because it's the easier, softer way for me. This is one of the officers I trained in CIT. He happened to be one of the arresting officers the night. when I was arrested on Miami Beach 16 years ago. And he looked at me in the crowd, and he said, man, he goes, I didn't even think you were still alive. I was like, man, you should have got this training 10 years ago, bro, because maybe, you know, but, you know, it was full circle. It was really cool. This year, the state attorney called me in, and they no-prossed my old charge. So I have a clean record now, because, yep. The same state attorney that wanted to send me to prison, who I resented so long for so many years because she was so hard on me, and people that I was arrested in the infancy stages of the program. People that came along after me committed worse crimes and had harder charges and got better deals than me. You know, I always felt like I got the short end of the stick, and you know, she made amends, and that's the same state attorney that I'm hugging right there. So, you know, I said, you all messed up now. I got a clean record. We're going to Wet Willie's. I want to say a special thank you for my family. It's my wife, my oldest, Julian, and the youngest addition to our family is Luca. He just turned 2 in January. Yeah, it's been a full circle. It's been a full circle. I want to share, if we have time, I think we could share both clips, if that's okay. You're good. Yeah, I think we have time. I want to share both clips of the movie. Before you share it, if you want to look at this movie for free, get your QRU code. This movie's free. You can stream it when you want. We're going to show you a trailer from it. But if you open your QRU, you can see that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to grab some water.
Oh, Molly, you switched the screens on us.
I'll put it back up if you guys need it. I have to close it. I have to close it and open a new window. Copy it, and then put it in the browser in the new window.
Yeah,
Bob to the rescue.
11 years ago, I was in jail on the 9th floor in the Dade County Jail. I'm laying in a pile of feces, vomit, and urine. I'm sick, I'm hearing voices, I'm seeing things, and they're like, oh, we'll put you on the psych floor. Thank goodness. Some people that understand me. If I get up there, it's way worse, man.
Last year, about 1.5 million people with serious mental illnesses were arrested.
Our jails have become the largest public psychiatric institutions in the country.
We were spending $80 million a year to warehouse people in conditions that you wouldn't let your dog stay in. We know how to fix it. It's a question of political will and leadership. It's foolhardy what we do now, and it's cool because we're not affording people the opportunity for recovery. We have this amazing program with amazing people that can help keep you out of here, and I'd like to do that.
I always had a normal life. Like I had this whole schizophrenia thing. I didn't know what was going on. This real psychological warfare.
He was really 5 years minimum. They just needed to diagnose it. And this kid has a totally different life. Oh man, I ain't fulfilled real life.
I'm in recovery. Drugs, alcohol, mental health. You know, I've said stuff to people, and they'll go before the judge. Man, this boy crazier than me. Why not listen to him?
What's he facing? I have approximately 45 years state prison.
See how you look picture perfect. And then all of a sudden within a minute everything is just collapsed.
I have mental illness that's going on within me. So I try my best every day. That's all I can do.
We're increasing the quality of life for our community and for our clients. There's no doubt.
You drown yourself, who's drowning you?
They're just people, and they want to do everything that everybody else wants to do. They want to be happy, they want to have dreams. So now we have a totally different system.
so now we're going to play the second one, which is the PBS one. So that one's free. You can stream. The PBS one, you need to have some sort of account to watch. You log in with your cable provider. It's going to show a commercial.
Let's set this palace.
It's not the one. It's not the one.
Looking in the mirror, there's nothing wrong with me. There's absolutely nothing wrong to make sense of that pain.
My friend said, never clue when I was upstairs.
And anything that I did, I couldn't not just see that. You need an answer.
It's the place where sadness leads off and depression begins.
It feels like you want to cry, but when you try to cry and release it, there's nothing there.
It's the place where nervousness becomes anxiety.
Slowly it started getting worse and worse every week. I just stopped going out of my room sort of at all.
Where excitement becomes mania.
I feel so restless. The one time I drove in the middle of the night to Pittsburgh just to turn around.
And habit becomes addiction.
If I take one pill, if I take one sip of a drink, it's over.
That continual usage becomes a coping method.
It's the place where simply living becomes painful.
I started to see things that weren't there.
Just a shadow in the corner. Then I started to see shadows in school. I started to get bullied by people I considered my best friends.
Teachers say, what is wrong with you? And then I just start breaking down, like, I don't want to talk about it.
I'll just cut myself or burn myself or bite myself so that I wouldn't feel all this pain that I felt inside myself.
All of us are affected by mental health challenges in some way, whether in our own lives or the life of someone we know, often hiding in plain sight.
I go to school, you put on a face, you're happy, you're bubbly, and then you eat lunch alone in the bathroom.
At that age, how are you ever going to admit, I'm thinking of suicide?
When something abrupt like someone you know dying from suicide happens, it's very difficult to understand what to do from there.
These are the chronic issues of early life. About 75% of mental illness has onset before age 25. This is the problem that we all deal with in secret.
Help is available, and with the right treatments, you can feel better.
After my parents got divorced in 3rd grade, we started going to a counselor.
I think I don't actually give my therapist enough credit.
I need to be medicated. How that sentence sounds. I need to be medicated.
I was on medications that they would put grown men on.
For many who have suffered silently, simply reaching out may be the most intimidating step of all. But the relief can be as indescribable as the pain once was.
Finding your person that can help you through times like that is extremely important. And once you start talking, then you'll realize that that's your person and that they can help you through these struggles and that you aren't alone.
You have value. You are worthy of love.
These are the journeys of more than 20 young Americans from all over the country and all walks of life, who have struggled with thoughts and feelings that have troubled and at times overwhelmed them. They share what they have learned about themselves, their families, and the world they live in. They speak for many of us. They speak to all of us.
All right. So, thank you. We'll put up the QRU for 45. go to 45. Start from there. So for you guys that didn't get the QRU code, that's the QRU for that. And then I'll go for the hiding in plain sight. Okay, that's for hiding in plain sight on PBS. I'm gonna go back. Yeah, I saw. Thanks. And I can email this to you, Karen, and just in case anybody missed it. Now I'm gonna go back to this one. This is the definition of insanity. This is the free one. So when you see me playing basketball on this film, just know that I got whooped so many times playing basketball that the older I got, the guys got younger and younger. I got out of jail, and I was like, "Hey man, you want a good court report or not? You gotta let me win, okay?" But with that, I want to say thank you guys so much for having me. Here's my contact info. There's my email, my LinkedIn, seriously, and my work and my phone number. If you guys ever need anything, I'm here to help, and as well as Alexia with the state of Delaware, and thank you, Karen, Mental Health Association. Thank you guys so much.